what's going on, like why is this happening in the body, and then creating that personalized protocol to really help them bring everything back into balance. And I really focus on like the three main systems, the gut, detoxification, and hormones, because I realized like we got to support these three systems, and we got to support in that specific order, because if you do detox or hormones before you support the gut, sometimes you can feel a lot worse.
Welcome to the Permission Slip podcast, where I, empowerment coach, mindset expert, and holistic nutritionist Carmen share with you the tools, conversations, and resources you need to write your own permission slip, take massive action, and become obsessed with your own life. Let's get started. So I wanted to show you Kate's book. This is what it looks like. And at the end, we're going to be giving away a copy of it. So it is Estrogen is a Bitch. It's like my favorite title ever. And so the subheading is Break the Cycle of Menstrual Agony to Embrace Sexy Confidence, Enhance Libido, Happy Periods, and Optimal Energy with Balanced Hormones. And so I just love that. And to do just a little bit of an intro of how I met Kate, I know someone else that is in sort of the functional medicine space, and she connected us because Kate and I are actually both in Florida. And so we were trying to connect with like-minded individuals here. So we connected on Zoom. We haven't actually been in person yet, but soon. And she's a physician's assistant and functional medicine practitioner, and she's the founder of Radiant Health. And so she really helps women reclaim their health, their vitality, and really uncovering what's going on with them with hormonal imbalances, gut issues, and more. So you can really create the life that you want to love and love living, because so many of these things, I like something that she had said was like, how estrogen is making your life not fun. And that really hit home to me, because that really happened to me last year with like chronic fatigue, really bad periods, other outwardly symptoms that I was having too, that I didn't really understand because I was quote unquote healthy. Like I was working out and I was eating good food and I take care of myself and I do stress reducing things. And it was like, okay, finally something else has to be wrong. And I wish we would have been connected back then, because I didn't have any resources. So I just like educated myself and put myself through a similar protocol. Because in her book, she has her really signature 5-step program that takes you like through a 28-day program, which is really, really cool. And it's something similar that I did to help heal my hormones. And I know that so many of my clients have this issue too. So super excited for Kate to be here. But before we do that, I want to give our bodies a little bit of self-love. So how many people practice like doing something for themselves each day that is like showing their body love? I don't know, maybe not. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we're really hard on ourselves. And so we'll just do a little bit of a self-love meditation, because that's really what this is all about, being grateful for our body and all that it does for us. Even in times when maybe things are a little out of balance, that's an opportunity to receive feedback that we need to operate differently. And oftentimes it's just as easy as slowing down and not being in that chronic go state that activates our nervous system and keeps our cortisol high all the time, which basically fucks up all of our hormones. So with that being said, let's go ahead and do a little meditation here. So sit comfortably. I like to wiggle a little bit, because when you first start a meditation, you're like, oh, gotta sit up straight, gotta do all the things. And then you're like, I am not relaxed whatsoever. So wiggle around a little bit. And for this meditation, we're gonna put our hands on our heart and just a light close of our eyes, but really whatever feels comfortable to you. And then just start noticing your breath as it comes in through your nose and out through your mouth. Filling your body, allowing it through your breath just to melt away a little bit. Not making your face so tight or clenching your jaw. Relaxing your shoulders, maybe rolling them a little bit. Relaxing your neck and your arms, your torso, your hips, your spine, thighs, calves, feet. Just focusing on breathing in and breathing out into that heart space. This is our life force right here. And with every breath, go ahead and just envision right in your heart center, a beautiful spark of golden light. Breathe in the light and breathe it out. And each time you breathe in the light, it begins to shine brighter and brighter, growing larger and larger. Breathing in, seeing the light brighter. Breathing out, grows larger. This is now radiating from your heart, enveloping your torso, your neck and shoulders, your hips and your legs, down to your feet and the crown of your head. You are this ball of light and energy, breathing it in and out through your heart. Relaxing within this peaceful, healing presence of this light, this life force energy that's always within you and around you, guiding you and supporting you. Go ahead and just on your own, take a few more deep breaths in and out. On the next one, let's breathe in and make a little noise on the out breath. In and out. Ah. And when you're ready, you can just bring a little movement to your fingers and drop your hands. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. Just knowing and feeling that light, that life force energy that we're so grateful for, that starts just at the center of our heart, that we can tap into that anytime that we want. So thank you so much for doing that. And again, you could do that anytime. Let's say you feel so like knocked out of alignment. You feel like, anxiety, overwhelm, an overcoming of emotion or feeling. Just focus on your breath and focus on your heart and build the light. And you can really get back into more of a peaceful state. So with that, how this is going to go this evening, I really encourage you to have a pen or pencil if you prefer, maybe a marker, probably not a crayon, that'd be weird, and a piece of paper. And you could write down your questions, because if you don't write them down, you're going to be like me, and then you have these important questions and you forget to ask them when we get to Q&A at the end. So that's how it's going to roll. And then we will do a giveaway for the book at the end. And yeah, with that, I will allow Kate to have the floor. Welcome, welcome. And thank you for being here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carmen. And I just want to say that was wonderful. I love meditations, especially guided meditations.
Oh,
because it helps me to just drop in, especially at the beginning of my journey. When I first started meditating, my mind would just like go crazy.
mm-hmm.
Talk about that, like why that happens. But that was beautiful, and a beautiful way just to start this. And it's just also just helps me to connect with everyone too. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm just excited for this conversation today because, yeah, as Carmen mentioned, I am a functional medicine physician assistant, and it's crazy. I've been a PA for almost 10 years now. It will be 10 years this year. And I started in Western medicine. I first did cardiology, then jumped into urgent care and a little bit ER, but ER was crazy. But I was in urgent care for a very long time when I realized it wasn't. About 6-7 years in, I realized it wasn't really in alignment with how I wanted to practice medicine, because it's just like treating everything with a pill. And I had my own health issues at the time. So I learned about functional medicine, and I was able to heal migraines and constipation and acne and anxiety, which I had struggled with for many, many years. But the problem was, after I did a lot of work on healing my body, I was on birth control for the acne for over 15 years. And then coming off birth control, my hormones went crazy. And I was like, what is going on with my body? And I was having irregular periods for the first time, really bad menstrual cramps, because when you're on the pill, you don't feel them, And I also had breast tenderness and was gaining weight in my butt, hips, and thighs. And I've always been a very lean, athletic build. So I was like, what is going on with my body? And so I finally looked into testing my hormones and discovered I had something called estrogen dominance. And, estrogen dominance is like a big medical term, but it's basically means there's an imbalance between estrogen and progesterone. Those are our main hormones. And we need to have a healthy balance between the two, because if one of those are off, like if we have a lot of estrogen in the system, or we don't have enough progesterone to balance out the estrogen, it causes a lot of problems. And that's what was happening in my body. One of the things that I saw when I did hormone testing was my progesterone levels were really, really low. And that's because birth control suppresses your hormones. And so when you come off, now your body has to start making it again. And it causes a lot of these symptoms. So I'm just curious, how many of you have heard that PMS is normal? Yeah. And unfortunately, it's not normal. It's not what we're taught that PMS is just something that as women we experience. And if it gets really bad, to take the birth control or take NSAIDs, like Advil or Levormyl for those cramps, or if we have those crazy mood swings, there's Prozac and all these anti-anxiety and antidepressants. But the problem is that there's an imbalance that's causing it. And if we can actually look what's going on with our hormones, we can actually get rid of a lot of these symptoms, and we don't have to suffer every single month. And so that's why I love functional medicine, because it really helped to open my eyes to what was going on in my body. And once I realized what was happening in my body, I recognized it was happening in a lot of other women's bodies as well, all the clients I was seeing. And I realized, wow, this is so common. I was seeing this in 80 to 90% of my clients. It is that common. And I'm like, okay, why isn't that information out there? And so that's why I ended up writing the book, because when I was thinking about this imbalance of estrogen and progesterone, I was like, wow, estrogen can be a bitch. And I don't want to give it a bad rep, because we do need estrogen. Estrogen is so important. It helps keep our skin nice and plump and moisturized. It gives us our curves. It also protects our bones from osteoporosis. It protects our brain, helps with our memory and our mood. It's really important for our muscles. It's really good for glucose regulation, important for our heart. So we need estrogen. The problem is when there's an imbalance or there's too much in the system. So I also like to call it the Goldilocks hormone. We don't want too much and we don't want too little of estrogen. We want that nice, healthy balance, and also making sure progesterone is also balancing it out as well. So there's different components to that. And with that being said, I realized there's 3 different patterns of estrogen dominance. We have the first pattern where there's normal levels of progesterone, really high levels of estrogen. And then there's low normals of progesterone, normal estrogen, or low levels of progesterone and high levels of estrogen. And so I talk a little bit about this in the book, but the only way to really know what kind of pattern you have is through testing. And so you can get testing done through like your regular doctor, just a simple blood test to check like your estrogen, estradiol, and progesterone. But that's only gives us a part of the picture, because if there is a little imbalance there's more, because there's something called estrogen metabolites. In fact, estradiol is just one estrogen, and there's another estrogen called estrone, which gets broken down into 3 different metabolites. And so that's important for me, because if we're looking at part of the picture, we're not really helping everybody. We got to look at the whole picture. And so I use specialized urine testing to look at those metabolites, which has really helped me to help balance my clients' hormone, including myself. So we were able to get rid of all those PMS symptoms. But yeah, as far as estrogen dominance, it is really, really common. So the next thing is, why are women experiencing this? Because if you think about it, I'm sure our grandmothers and great grandmothers back in the day, they didn't have these crazy PMS symptoms. They might have had some mild cramps, but they didn't really suffer with the irregular periods, the crazy mood swings. But if you think about it, there's just so many things in our environment that they didn't have today. First on our toxins, we are exposed to so many different toxins on a daily basis. From the shampoo, the body washes, the makeup, even laundry detergent, things that we're cleaning, household cleaning products, everything we're using in our home, even the nonstick cookware and all the plastic food storage containers, the plastic water bottles. There's so many toxins in our environment. And I realized when I was studying functional medicine and learning about all these toxins like BPA that's found in plastics and, the phthalates and stuff like that, that's in our skincare, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to run away and just go either live in a bubble or run away and live on an island and just grow everything and make everything myself. But then I realized, okay, that's not realistic. So at the end of the day, what I really want women to understand is that, okay, yes, there's toxins that are present, but we do the best that we can. And we can, control what we can control, which is in our home and what we put on our body, and also support detoxification, supporting our liver, supporting our gut, making sure we're sweating and exercising. Because if we can support these, pathways in our body, even if we get exposed, it's not going to build up. So we do the best that we can. And so that's one of the reasons. Another thing that is also big is our gut health. There's such a huge link between our gut and our hormones. Believe it or not, in Western medicine, we tend to look at all the systems as separate, but in functional medicine, I'm looking at, okay, how is the gut impacting our hormones? In fact, I won't balance hormones until I treat the gut first. And that's because in our gut, we have all kinds of microorganisms, from bacteria, viruses, parasites, even a little bit of yeast. A little bit of yeast is fine. And everything should be living in community with each other. But the problem is when one of these organisms starts taking over, like yeast or parasites, for example, or even a specific bacteria like E. coli. We always hear about traveler's diarrhea, E. coli, and we get prescribed antibiotics because it gives us diarrhea. But we do have a little bit of E. coli in our gut as long as it's not taking over. And so so this is really important because this bacteria that's in our gut, we have bacteria that's responsible for something called estrogen metabolism. And so this is important because when our body makes estrogen, once we use it, it gets broken down in our liver and it goes from an active form to an inactive form. And then it binds to something called bile, which our liver produces, and then it goes to our gut. And so that way it can get eliminated through our poop. And so it's important that this pathway is happening, because if we have this healthy bacteria and it helps estrogen get eliminated, but we have something all of a sudden called dysbiosis, which means an overgrowth of either bacteria or yeast or parasites. It's disrupting our microbiome. And that's all those organisms in the gut. And it's actually impacting estrogen metabolism. So we have something called beta glucuronidase, which is an enzyme that's supposed to be in low to no amount in the gut. But when we have this dysbiosis, it actually increases the enzyme. And then it takes that inactive estrogen that's supposed to get taken out of our gut and it turns it back to active form. And this is a problem because now the body says, oh, you're active. Well, let's bring you back in and start using you again instead of getting rid of the excess amount. And that's why a lot of women will tend to have higher levels of estrogen because they're not getting rid of it in their gut. So that's really, really important. And a lot of things can impact our gut health. For me, I had issues with my gut. I had a lot of constipation and bloating. So right there was a sign I had issues in my gut. And that's because, one, I took a lot of Advil, being active, aches and sprains and injuries as an athlete, and then also took it for migraines. So medications, even birth control, there's a lot of studies, and I talk about it in my book too. Studies show there's a link between birth control and something called leaky gut. And leaky gut is basically where it where we have a very, very thin lining in our intestines. It's like one cell thick, and it's protected by this mucus barrier. But the problem is when we get insult to the gut. So when we take medications, or we get a lot of bad bacteria, or we're exposed to toxins like pesticides, things like that in our food and in our environment, it's going to disrupt that barrier. So it's supposed to be very, very tight. It doesn't allow much except for like water and vitamins and minerals to go through. But when we get that leaky gut, it opens up, and now we have like bad bacteria going through in these large particles. And the problem with that is because the immune system's on the other side. And this is where we start to see a lot of autoimmune disorders, because we get that leaky gut, these large particles like bacteria, it starts affecting our immune system. And what's interesting is that women, if they have endometriosis, the bacteria that goes through, it can trigger your immune system, increase inflammation, but it also gets absorbed into your bloodstream. And studies show that they are finding this bacteria in our gut in the lining of the uterus with women who have endometriosis. They're finding these toxins, they're called LPS, lipopolysaccharides, and they're finding those toxins from the bacteria in the gut in the uterus, which is insane. So you can't say there's no link between hormones and gut because those studies right there show that link. So it's just so interesting. So yeah, gut health is really important. The food that we're consuming, making sure it's organic as much as possible. I get it. Sometimes organic can be very, very expensive. So Environmental Working Group is one resource I highly recommend. Every year they pull out a report. They have their Clean 15 and Dirty Dozen. And I recommend at least get the Dirty Dozen organic. And also the rule of thumb, anything that has a thin skin, get that organic as well. Because you really want to reduce the consumption of pesticides as much as possible. And it's funny, I've had this conversation with my mom. She's like, organic isn't 100% organic. I'm like, I know, Mom. Yes, it can still have a little bit of pesticides, but I would rather have the least amount of pesticides and reduce my toxic burden as much as possible. So at the end of the day, like I said, we just do the best that we can. And so, yeah, focusing on, better quality foods, also more whole plant foods as well, because plant foods are going to really help with that estrogen metabolism. And so I like to say, an acronym I always recommend is 3 Fs. So fat, fiber, and fermented foods. So if you focus on those food groups, fiber is going to be all your leafy greens, your vegetables, beans. Fats, so a lot of healthy fats, especially omega-3s. So that's going to be your fish, but make sure it's wild caught and low mercury. So another acronym for high fat fish, but low mercury is SMASH-C, SMASH-C. And that stands for salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, herring, and cod. So if you stick to those fish, those are low mercury, because again, mercury is another thing that we get exposed to. I used to eat a lot of tuna until I found out I had high levels of mercury. And so I cut out tuna, I cut out all the I used to love Chilean sea bass. So I don't eat those types of fish anymore. But the thing with heavy metals is that they actually attach to estrogen receptors in our body. And so now our body thinks, and the same thing with the toxins too. Toxins contain chemicals called xenoestrogens, which are foreign. They look like it's a molecule that looks like estrogen. And when we're exposed or come in contact, the estrogen or the xenoestrogens and heavy metals can attach to estrogen receptors. And now our body thinks there's more estrogen than there really is. So some women may not have a lot of estrogen, but they have these symptoms of estrogen dominance. And it's because of all these things that they're exposed to. So something to keep in mind. But so we went over food, we went over gut health, toxins. Another big thing is stress. And actually, Carmen, I love your post today and how you actually talk about this low-grade chronic stress. And I'm so glad that you called it that, because a lot of the time, especially as like an ambitious woman, go-getter, sometimes we're like, yeah, I'm not stressed. I'm just doing my thing. Like I thrive off of stress. Like I thrive, like I'm just go, go, go. And I've had a lot of clients too. I'll ask them like, are you stressed? And they're like, no, I'm not stressed. But there's different types of stressors. We have physical, emotional, and chemical stress. And most of the time, it's the emotional stress that we're not looking into. We may not feel stress physically, and stress can be like when we exercise or if we have an injury or we go through surgery. Chemical stress can be like from radiation. We're always exposed to different like EMFs and, our microwave or the sun, which I don't use a microwave anyway, but, but sometimes we're exposed to the microwave, all these different the radiation forms of radiation. So that can be a form of chemical stress. Plus our body is, our cells are constantly producing byproducts and waste and energy. And that's another form of chemical stress. So, if you say you don't have stress, there's always stress. But the main thing I want to address is the mental stress, because I love this talk today. I am grateful for my body. And that's because we really take our body for granted. Our bodies are just so beautiful, so intricately made. And if you think about like the intelligence, the innate intelligence that's happening at a cellular level to keep our bodies functioning, we don't even have to think about it. It's just absolutely amazing. And so I really want you to start thinking about like, what are the thoughts we're having about our body, about our health? Because, when we're not feeling well, we tend to just have these negative thoughts like, oh, I'm just not feeling well today. Am I ever going to get better? Or is this ever going to, are the doctors ever going to figure this out? Like, maybe I just have something that I'm going to have for the rest of my life. So like really start thinking about the thoughts that you have. I used to think that with migraines, I'm like, goodness, I'm never going to get rid of this. Like, this is just something, even though I was the only one in my immediate family, there wasn't really like a direct genetic link. I'm like, great, I guess this is just something I have to deal with. And I also was thinking when I had the constipation and the bloating, my parents had a lot of gastrointestinal issues too. They had heartburn and digestive issues. And I'm like, gosh, I'm like following, we think genetics, a lot of things pop up because of our genetics, and that's just the way it is. But I want to let you know, like our genes are not our fate. And and also to be aware of like the thoughts we're thinking about our bodies, because our thoughts are sending signals to our cells. And I'm a huge belief of this. I've actually done a lot of work in diving into like Joe Dispenza and Gabor Mate and even Wayne Dyer. They just talk about how powerful our thoughts are in influencing our health. So there's a lot of science, a lot of research looking into this. And it's a bummer because Western medicine doesn't even look at this, but it's so important that we are addressing, the mental, emotional stress. And it may not necessarily, I've had clients where they're like, yeah, my job is boring. I'm like, well, that's great. But what are the thoughts you have around your health? And most importantly, do you believe that you can get better? Because there's a difference between wanting to get better, but also actually believing you can get better, because that's going to be important. Because if you don't believe you want to get better, but you don't believe you can get better, that can actually hinder you from actually getting better. So I really wanted to talk about this stress piece because this low grade chronic stress is just kind of like under the radar, but it's there, it's present. But not only that, sometimes because of our conditioning, and this is what happened with me, I had a lot of stress in my life, just the stress I put on myself to, go to PA school, to make the grades, to get a job. And after that, it was just, I was always like, worried about what people thought about me. I was always people pleasing, making sure they were happy and not really taking care of myself. And it created a lot of stress in my body. And so I developed this conditioning, and I recognized, I was like, wow, I was in a chronic stress mode or survival mode for many, many years. And I think that also contributed to the hormonal imbalance. So even, like you, Carmen, I was like meditating, I was doing all the right things, eating healthy, exercising, meditating, doing yoga, but my body was still in a survival mode. And now I've been able to navigate out of that because I had to really look at my conditioning, look at my thoughts, my beliefs, why why am I being triggered? Why does the anxiety still continue to pop up? And once I had that awareness, I was able to finally move out of that chronic survival mode and be in what's called a parasympathetic state, when your body is in a rest and digest state. Because when you're in that state, digestion functions optimally, your reproductive organs function optimally. So your hormones are going to be more in an optimal state. But when you're in that survival mode or sympathetic state, it's going to shut off your digestion. It's going to shut off your reproduction and producing all those hormones that we need. So there's a piece that doesn't really get looked at and addressed, but it's so, so important. But those are the main causes of estrogen dominance. And I just realized I haven't talked about the symptoms, but I do go over a lot of the symptoms, and I have a quiz too. So if you're like listening to this, and at some point you're like, well, I don't know if I'm estrogen dominant or not, you can go to my webpage. I have a quiz. You can take the quiz and it'll let you know if you're likely to be or not. But 5 of the top symptoms I discovered with estrogen dominance was the irregular periods. So having periods like, they're not consistent every month. They're not, every month, every 28, 30 days. No, they are just irregular all over the place. Like one period could be 40 days. The next one's 30 days. The next one's 35 days. It's very inconsistent, irregular every month. That is not normal. So periods should be on average, like anywhere from 26 to 32 days. And it can be off of like a couple of days. So if it's 26, 1 month, 27, another month, that's fine. If it's off a couple of days, that's fine, as long as it's pretty consistently regular. So irregular periods is the first symptom. The second was heavy periods. And that's because estrogen is responsible for the thickening of the uterine lining. So inside the uterus, we have what's called the endometrium. And basically it gets really thick every month because it's preparing our body for pregnancy. We need that thick endometrial lining. And if pregnancy doesn't happen, then the uterus lets go of that. And that's when we have our period. So when women have a lot of estrogen in their system, it actually causes a really thicker endometrial lining than normal. So that's why a lot of women will experience these really heavy bleeds. So on average, women should be changing tampons, pads about 6 to 8, at least for the first few days. And then it should taper off. And on average, periods last anywhere from 3 to 7 days. But if you're soaking through pads and tampons, especially the first few days, and you're changing more than 6 to 8, that's not normal. Those are really, really heavy periods. And also clotting. Some women will notice clotting, which is not normal, or the blood is very, very dark. So that's another sign. It should be like a nice ruby Cabernet. It shouldn't be very dark, And the third symptom is PMS. And that's because when you don't have that balance between estrogen and progesterone, you'll get those severe menstrual cramps, the mood swings, the headaches, the insomnia. And actually the mood swings, headaches, and insomnia is all due to the lower progesterone levels. So I'll see that commonly with the 2 types of estrogen dominance that have that low progesterone.
This episode is brought to you by the Life Coaching Summer School. Now, what is Life Coaching Summer School? It's all about building a better life for yourself and not having to choose between enjoying your summer and creating the life of your dreams. It's an opportunity to live a both and life. So an opportunity to enjoy the shit out of your summer, but still work to achieve your goals. Become more resilient when life happens. Start keeping your commitments to yourself, challenging your own beliefs, questioning everything, and then getting curious, achieving optimal health, letting go of what no longer serves you. That could be people, places, or things, developing a connection to God, source, universe that's so strong that you become totally unshakable, and learning to connect with yourself and others on a deeper, more intentional level, learning self-awareness practices to catapult your growth, and really taking this idea that you have this big dream, this goal, this vision, developing that and breaking it down into aligned, energized, powerful action steps that are the next best steps for you. So isn't it time that you stopped letting your life simply pass you by, going from one goal to the next without celebrating or recognizing your accomplishments, or maybe just getting stuck overthinking everything. The Life Coaching Summer School, that's what it's all about. So if you're ready to have the shifts in your life that allow you to take quantum leaps over the next 2 months without sacrificing your summer, then click the link in the show notes and join us now.
And then if there's a lot of estrogen in the system, what happens is we get a chemical released called prostaglandin, which actually increases inflammation and helps our uterus to contract so we can get rid of that endometrial lining every month to have our period. But estrogen causes more of those prostaglandins to be released when we have a lot in the system. So that increases more inflammation, causes more pain. So that's why women get those really severe, debilitating menstrual cramps. And then the fourth symptom is breast tenderness, which is what I also experienced. You get the swelling, painful breasts, and that's because estrogen causes that breast tissue to swell and fill up with fluid. And so if you're very tender, you can't even like put on a bra or even like lay on your side. That's not normal, especially if you're experiencing that every month. Also, in addition to the breast tenderness, some women will develop something called fibrocystic breast disease, or even cysts and nodules. Yeah, breast pain is the worst. It was not fun when I'm like, what's going on? So that is not normal. And you don't have to live that way anymore, because once I balanced out the hormones, it completely went away. And so the fifth symptom, and the last one is weight gain. And that's what I also experienced, especially in the butt, hips, and thighs, because it's interesting when we look at the body, when women are gaining weight in certain areas, we can actually kind of pinpoint as to what's happening in the body. So with estrogen dominance, it's mostly in the butt, hips, and thighs, because as we go through puberty, we get our curves in our butt, hips, and thighs. So when women are starting to gain more weight and that's where it goes, that's definitely a sign of estrogen dominance. Now, if women are gaining weight in their abdomen, that's usually a sign of insulin resistance, diabetes, also high cortisol levels. However, women can still have a combination of all of those, especially if they just have weight gain all over. So, just because, if you're gaining weight all over, don't rule out estrogen dominance. It still can be playing a role in addition to a few other things. So those are the 5 telltale signs of estrogen dominance. But, Carmen's mentioned a few: fatigue, low libido, even acne, constipation, bloating, because if you have those gut issues, you're going to have some estrogen problems. And those are a few other symptoms. But as I mentioned, out of the 5 symptoms that I talked about, if you have about 2 or 3, it's definitely likely you have estrogen dominance. So that's just kind of a quick assessment. But yeah, you can definitely take the quiz. There's definitely more in-depth questions there as well. But yeah, for the most part, went over the causes and the symptoms. So some quick tips that I usually like to have women start with. Say they discover, okay, they might have estrogen dominance or some kind of hormonal imbalance. I go through my 5 steps in the book, but one of those steps is my favorite: seed cycling. And I'm curious, how many of you have heard about seed cycling? Okay, great. So I love that you've heard about it, Carmen, because seed cycling is one of my favorite ways to naturally balance hormones. And it's so easy and simple, like you can do it right away. So seed cycling basically is taking certain seeds during certain times of the month. So when we have our period, we have the menstrual cycle, and it's broken up into 2 phases. We have the follicular phase, which is the first half, and then we have the luteal phase, which is the second half. And so when you seed cycle, during the first half, so we're going to just use 28 days because it's easy. The first half, so 14 days, I recommend grinding up a tablespoon of pumpkin and flax seeds, and do that every single day for 14 days. And the reason is pumpkin and flax actually helps with the production, but also metabolism of estrogen. Then once you do that for 14 days, you switch over, and then you're going to grind sesame and sunflower seeds, 1 tablespoon each, every single day. And that helps to support progesterone production, but also continues to support that estrogen metabolism as well. So So there's some science to the seeds because they contain these nutrients to help support the hormones. And if you do that, I always recommend, especially if you're irregular, start on the first day of your period. But if your period is like every 1.5, 2 months, sometimes starting with the new moon, because it might be forever till you finally get your period. Start with the new moon. So Google it, find out when is the next moon, and you can start then. If you're not that irregular, or even if you're regular and you have the PMS symptoms, you start with your next period. So the day one will be, flax and pumpkin, and then you go from there. And so if your if your total cycle is longer than 28 days, once you get to day 28, you can start the seed cycle all over again. You don't have to wait until you start your period. You can just go ahead and start that cycle. It won't really impact your period. I have my clients do it all the time, but for those that have regular periods, it does help really. I've actually had one client, she's like, as soon as she's like, oh, my PMS went away. I also had another client, she's like, just the seed cycle, I haven't even bounced her hormones. She started losing weight. I was like, this is amazing. Because I love, it's so simple, but it's the power of food. Food is medicine. So a question came in, am I putting ground up seeds in my oatmeal or breakfast smoothie? Great question. Yeah. And that's why I love the seeds. You can actually get creative with it. I would put it in my oatmeal, but you can also add it to your smoothie. You can sprinkle it on your salad. You can mix it in with some yogurt. I had another client get creative and mix it in with her ground turkey. So you can add it in however you want. I even have, I think it's my estrogen reset course. So I created an online course diving more into estrogen dominance, but I also created little seed balls with the seeds because I have a sweet tooth, and I'm always looking for different ways to make my own treats that doesn't have a lot of sugar. And so I would package, so you can also find another recipe online and add those seeds into it. That's another great way to do that as well. So absolutely. But yeah, so seed cycling is one of my favorite ways. And then focusing on those 3 F's, you really want to get in the fiber, fats, and, I didn't even talk about the fermented foods. So fermented foods are really important because they contain healthy gut bacteria, and that's going to really help support your microbiome. And so fermented foods is yogurt, but I always recommend coconut yogurt because a lot of us are sensitive to dairy. And so especially if someone's complaining of gut issues and acne, dairy is a huge link contributing to acne. You definitely want to eliminate dairy as much as possible. So coconut yogurt is a great alternative, but there's sauerkraut, kimchi, pickled veggies, pickles, stuff like that, even kombucha. However, I always give the disclaimer, if you're eating fermented foods and you have gut issues, and all of a sudden you get bloated and gassy, that means there's probably an overgrowth of bad bacteria. That's what happened to me. I couldn't enjoy kombucha, and I love kombucha. And it wasn't until I cleared that bacteria out and treated that, I finally am able to drink kombucha again, thankfully. But yeah, that's a sign. If you're eating fermented foods and all of a sudden your digestive issues get worse, that's a sign that something's going on with your gut. Once you get that cleared out and resolved, you can enjoy those fermented foods again. Also, supporting detox. I highly recommend, if you're not exercising, exercise to sweat or get access to a sauna because you want to sweat as much as possible. That's one of the best ways to help detox. And then also having a regular bowel movement. So another reason to, check your gut. If you're not going to the bathroom every single day, at least once a day, you definitely want to get the gut checked because that's going to, help with the elimination of estrogen. So supporting detoxification by sweating, also hydrating, making sure you're drinking a rule of thumb is at least half your body weight in ounces of water per day. And then if you're sweating, making sure that you're getting in those electrolytes too. My best form of electrolytes is coconut water because it's natural. There's no dyes and it's just natural sugar from the coconut. And that's my favorite way to add in those electrolytes. So question.
I think we'll have a number of questions if you want to open it up for questions. And I know there's one in the chat.
Yeah. I was going to answer this question. So I finally tried kimchi, it made me bloated and gassy. How long do I have to eat it for before that goes away? Great question. I would get your gut checked out because if there's stuff going on, I don't think it will go away until you get the gut issues treated first. But once that's treated, and it can take, so when I order a gut test for a client and I figure out what's going on and I put them on a specific protocol, it can take 2 to 3 months before they start to feel better. And once they feel better, then I have them bring back the foods that was irritating them. So like in your case, like I would have them bring back the kimchi and the fermented foods and see how they feel. And at that point, they should be feeling a lot better and not have the bloating and gas anymore. So yeah, so it would be a good idea to look into the gut and see what's going on, because that's a sign. That's definitely a sign that there's something going on there. Finishing 30-day detox with supplements from ID Life. It's done wonders. I've done it next week. I'm going to do the kimchi test. Okay, awesome. What type of testing do you recommend for gut and hormones so people know what to ask their doctor for, and why is not a normal blood test not optimal? Great question. So regular doctors are not going to do the tests that I recommend with my clients, because if you ask your primary doctor for a stool test and you don't have diarrhea, they're not going to order it, because a regular stool test through like Quest or LabCorp, that's what we use here in Florida, only checks if you have like an acute infection. So if you took antibiotics or you went to Mexico, now you have this diarrhea and it's not going away after like a week. What they're checking for is to see if you have an acute infection with like parasites, or if you took the antibiotics, if you have something called C. diff, which is this overgrowth of bad bacteria. It's funny because the antibiotics wipe out your good bacteria, causes bad bacteria to grow, and then they treat it with more antibiotics. But anyway, that's what's happening. So that's what the test is checking for, but it's not checking what I want to know what's going on with your gut, which is how good is your gut lining? Do you have a possible leaky gut? Do you have an overgrowth of that bad bacteria or parasites or yeast that we need to go in and clear out? How good are you digesting and absorbing your food? Because that's also really important. I had that issue when I looked at my gut. I had leaky gut. I had an overgrowth of bad bacteria, and I wasn't digesting my food properly. And also I needed to bring in a lot of probiotics, because with stress, it actually kills off our good bacteria. And studies show that. When I was learning about functional medicine and looking up, gut health and stress, it's like, yeah, stress kills off Lactobacillus acidophilus. And that's your good gut bacteria. If you think about it, it's in all the probiotics in the stores. And when I did my gut test, I barely had any Lactobacillus acidophilus. And I was like, oh, wow, it's crazy what stress does to us. So one of the tests that actually everybody can have access to, one of the first tests I use with my clients, it doesn't go in depth and tell you if you have an overgrowth of bad bacteria or not, but it can actually give you a general idea of what's going on with the gut, and also what are the best foods to eat and food to avoid. So it's almost like a food sensitivity gut test in one that I love to use with my clients. It's called Viome, Viome. And you guys can actually use my code Radiant10. I don't get any commission off of it, but you get $10 off, which is awesome. And that's because I want more people to have access to this test. And it's a really good test. It's a great start. And it was helpful for me because, some functional practitioners will put you on an elimination diet, but it's not specific and it's not personalized to you. And the reason why I like the gut test is because it's not a food sensitivity where it's looking at your immune system via blood. It's actually looking at how the bacteria is reacting with your food. And so it was a big eye opener for me, because when I had the bloating and constipation, tomatoes came up and I was eating them almost every day. And I loved tomatoes, but yeah, I had to get rid of them, and I still cannot eat them to this day. So yeah, I would start with that test. It's a great test. And then if you work with a functional medicine practitioner, I recommend either a GIFX through Genova. That's the one I use. Other practitioners use a GI map from Doctor's Data. So those are two great tests. As far as hormones, I like what's called the Dutch test, is a dried urine hormone test, because it looks at the breakdown, all the different metabolites of estrogen, plus it's looking at your cortisol throughout the day. Because if you go to your doctor and you ask, hey, can you check my hormones? Can you check my cortisol? They're going to do very basic tests. They can't check all the estrogen metabolites. They can check, you can at least ask them to check progesterone and at least estradiol and estrone, because a lot of times they'll check just estrogen, which is just general. That's not helpful. You need to be specific. Estradiol and estrone. Now, the Dutch test actually looks at the metabolites of estrone, which is helpful for me, because then it helps me to personalize the protocol to help balance the hormones.
And then the timing of it matters too, right? Because during different times of your cycle, certain things are going to be higher or lower, and doctors just order it willy-nilly, and you don't know where you're at in your cycle and where you should be.
Exactly. Absolutely. And that is a great point. And yeah, I was gonna talk about it because it's so important. A lot of, the primaries will just order it, or some women that work with like a fertility specialist, they're like, yeah, let's just check your hormones on day 3 of your period. But I'm like, that doesn't make sense, because I know they're looking at ovarian reserve and egg quality, which you can do that. But if you're actually looking at hormonal imbalance, you need to check it during the luteal phase. Right. That is the second half of your menstrual cycle. So on average, if you have like a 28-day cycle, the peak time is anywhere between days 19 to 22, but I typically found day 21 is the best. So I just pinpoint that one day where progesterone is going to be at its peak, because we don't produce progesterone in the first half. We do produce estrogen because we need it to build up that endometrial lining. We also need estrogen for our egg to be released. Once that happens, estrogen starts to come down, progesterone goes up, but then we get another bump of estrogen when progesterone's increasing too. So when we're looking at that peak, we're looking at the ratio of progesterone and estrogen. And so it's really, really important that it's being done during that time of the cycle. And so talk to your doctor about that. Like, do you know when to test my hormones, or not do you know, but when should we test my hormones, and see what they say. If they're not saying, yeah, we need to do it during this time of the cycle, find someone else who can do that, because it's really, really important.
What do you think about the Everlywell Women's Health Test? Because they actually have you do a blood test, and they have you do it during certain times, and track the times.
Absolutely. I did have a client come to me with the Everlywell, and it's good to start, especially, because the Dutch test is a little bit higher of an investment.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, but it is a little bit limited. Doesn't give you the estrogen metabolites.
Correct.
So, but it does give you the cortisol, which is great, because not a lot of tests, if you just look at cortisol, so primary can order cortisol, but usually they're checking it either in the morning or if you go in the afternoon, whenever you get your blood work, but that's not helpful. We want to see what the pattern looks like throughout the day, because different cortisol patterns determines the treatment too, because if you have high cortisol, I'm going to treat that differently than if you have really, really low cortisol. And so I love seeing cortisol throughout the day. That's really important. So you can do the Everlywell. It is definitely a great start. But if you really want more in depth, a Dutch test would be the next option. So I hope that answers. Okay. Does that answer the question about why is normal blood test not optimal?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, perfect. All right. And what is important to know about estrogen after your menopause? Great question. So when women start going through menopause, that period right before, the first hormone to decline is progesterone. And so if we know that, 2 of the patterns of estrogen dominance is low progesterone, we know that women may not necessarily have symptoms of estrogen dominance while they are young and they're cycling, but as they start going through menopause, they may develop estrogen dominance because progesterone starts to decline. So it creates that estrogen dominance effect because estrogen's still up here before it starts declining and meets progesterone. And so estrogen, as I mentioned before, is really important. Because when estrogen finally starts declining to catch up, our body's not producing progesterone anymore, or progesterone and estrogen. Once we go through menopause, we actually lose our protectiveness. So we actually both need progesterone and estrogen, like progesterone and estrogen are both needed for our bones to prevent osteoporosis, progesterone's our feel-good hormone. And also it keeps us happy. It helps us to sleep at night. So when women's progesterone levels are low, they have the insomnia and they have more anxiety. They're a little bit more on edge. They don't handle stress well. And then with the estrogen, you're losing your protectiveness on the heart, your blood vessels. You're more prone to have insulin resistance and diabetes. It's interesting because like too much estrogen and too low can cause very similar, like the insulin resistance, the weight gain. That's why it's important to have that healthy balance. And also really important for our mind, our memory, because a lot of women that develop Alzheimer's is due to low estrogen. So it's really important that we're supporting. And there's a lot of practitioners that will put women on compounded plant-based hormones, which are way different than the prescription hormones that are synthetically made coming from a horse's urine. So you definitely want to do your education there. I find that the plant-based compounded hormones can be really helpful and beneficial for women in menopause because it gives that protection back and they feel so much better on these hormones. But you have to work with a practitioner that's, very skilled and knowledgeable about that. And the good thing about the compounded is that they are making it personalized to you, because the prescription is not, you can't adjust the dose. It's just kind of a general dose. And so it can really mess women up if you're not careful. So another question, if you had a client who would like to discontinue taking birth control or remove an IUD, would you begin a protocol through supplementation or diet to facilitate hormonal balancing during the transition and or after stopping or removal? Awesome. Yeah, that is a great question. I've actually had a lot of clients coming to me, wanting to come off birth control. And absolutely, I definitely start with supplementation, diet. I actually get them on the seed cycling to go ahead, one, to get used to doing it, but also just to prepare their body, give them the nutrients. Because at the end of the day, birth control does deplete a lot of our nutrients like B vitamins and magnesium, which we need for estrogen metabolism and just metabolism in general, and for detoxification and so many different things in the body. So I always start them on, nutrients. Sometimes I'll do nutrient testing to see where they're deficient. But if anything, a good multivitamin is great to start. But also, looking at what are they eating, seeing if we can pull out, I usually recommend pulling out gluten and dairy because that's very inflammatory. It affects our gut. And then, I like to do like the biome and see, okay, what are the best foods for them to focus on eating and other foods to pull out while we work on healing their gut. And then, I like to test the hormones 3 months after they stop. If you test too soon, you're not going to get accurate results because it does take about at least 3 cycles, 3 months for the body to regulate itself to be producing those hormones again. So you want to wait a few months to get those hormones tested. And then once you get them tested, then you can, if you see a practitioner, then you can really get that protocol personalized. That's a great question.
So who else has questions? Anybody else have any questions that they want to ask? I just want to kind of like summarize and recap a little bit because everything that you said was so important, but it was like so much information and it might be terminology that we're just like not familiar with. So sometimes if you're like me, what happens if I don't understand, then my brain turns off and then I'm not listening and I'm not learning, right? And so I think a few of the really important things that you said was to get a test to figure it out. One of the biggest things that people always ask me, if they see me using some sort of supplement or doing some sort of protocol, oh, how do you do that? I want to do that too. It's like, well, why do you want to do that? Is this the right thing for you? So you don't just want to start taking supplements and doing protocols that aren't right for you. First of all, you're going to waste a shit ton of money. Secondly, it's probably not going to produce the results that you want. And so I think doing some of the right testing for you at the right time, I think starting with Kate's quiz is a really good way to start to see, like, do I have some of the signs of estrogen dominance? Is this affecting me? And then really listening to your body. But I loved how you talked about all of the lifestyle things that you can do. And it's not only for hormones, it's for just our health in general. It's what I talk about all the time. It's like exercising and sweating as often as possible, daily movement, eating really good food, de-stressing every single day. And I like to say that my logical brain doesn't think that I'm stressed, but it's inside that the stress is happening. That's where that low-grade chronic stress happens. And then oftentimes it happens from our thoughts. And that's another thing that you talked about. When I was going through my hormone stuff last year, one of my symptoms was I had this outwardly rash, and which is really weird because I'm not really allergic to anything. I don't get rashes. I've went over the last 2 years and switched to almost all clean products for body care and home and makeup and all of that. And what I came to learn was I was feeling worse and worse and worse. My symptoms were just getting worse and worse and worse. I had a cyst in my breast that was getting bigger. I had this rash, my fatigue was getting worse, but it was really all tied to my mindset. And once I stopped oh my gosh, seeking outside of myself, I have to go to the doctor, I have to figure this out, I have to figure out what's going on so much, and listen to my body, and then tried to understand what was happening with my body and stuck to a consistent protocol that was specific for what was going on with me. Then I started telling myself that every day I'm healthy, healed, and whole, instead of being in that I'm sick, I'm tired, I'm fatigued. That rash went away, things started getting so much better. But it's really easy for our mind to stay in that spot. And I'm so thankful that you talked about that. And the other thing is oftentimes we think that because it's common to have bad periods, or it's common for when women to get older have issues, that doesn't mean that it's normal. And I think that the work that you're doing, and other women and men too, but in this space, that are making it so it's not normal, and that we can feel great and we don't have to go down this rabbit hole of feeling like shit, is just so good. And I just really commend you for that. And the resources that you have are really awesome. If someone wanted to work with you or learn more, or do you have consultations, programs, how can we connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to connect, I'm on Instagram at Kate Vazquez _PA. I'm very active on there. But if you want to work with me, go to my website, yourradianthealth.com. The quiz is there as well. But you can schedule a complimentary 30-minute hormone assessment where I get the opportunity just to learn more about you, what you're struggling with, your journey, where you're at, and how I can best support you moving forward. So you can definitely set up a call on the website. I have a couple different programs that I've created. I've created boot camp to really help teach women about lifestyle, mindset, and diet, especially when it comes to supporting their hormones. But I've also have another program where we're really diving in deep, and we're doing the testing. We're figuring out what's going on, why is this happening in the body, and then creating that personalized protocol to really help them bring everything back into balance. And I really focus on the three main systems: the gut, detoxification, and hormones, because I realized we got to support these three systems, and we got to support in that specific order, because if you do detox or hormones before you support the gut, sometimes you can feel a lot worse. So everything's just very systematic with me. And I love being able to just put all the pieces together, because it's once we do, it just becomes so clear, what's happening in the body. But that's where you can find me and reach out to me. And also the book too is available on Amazon. So you can find it. It's in all formats: paperback, hardcover, Kindle, and the audio version. So
we will draw our winner now. So let's see. Kristen is our winner.
Yay.
So
Thank you.
Yay. So I will send you a copy of her book. I believe I have your current address. Maybe you could text it to me just to make sure. And we'll get that over to you. Any final words, or does anybody have any final questions? I know this was a lot of information, but it's such important information. I hope that you can see how everything is so connected. It's not just eat good, de-stress, fix your gut. It's all the things are so interconnected.
And most importantly, work on this. Because
Yes.
I realized on my journey, I had yeah, worked on the body part. And in fact, that's why I have a triangle as my part of my logo, mind, body, and spirit. Because if we don't have, if we're working on the body and we're not working on like mind and spirit, those three have to be balanced in order for us to have optimal health. And if one of those are off balance or not in alignment, it can really prevent us from achieving the optimal health that we desire and we deserve. So yeah, definitely work on that mindset, which I'm going to reveal to you guys now. I'm actually in the process of creating a masterclass on anxiety because I realize how big this is. A lot of women are struggling, especially being in this survival mode and that low grade chronic stress. So yeah, I am planning on releasing it in August. I'm creating it now and eventually creating a program to really help women learn how to reset their nervous system and work on that mindset piece. So that is in the works. So you guys are the first to know.
I love that. That's going to be so important because I don't even think that most people realize how important that is and how we are in that state so often. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you for the work that you do and how you show up. You're just like this, like we were doing the light meditation, and that was like you know, we open your eyes and here you are, like this positive energy, so passionate about the work that you do. So thank you for what you do, and thank you to everybody for joining.
Yeah, thank you all. It's been a pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.